Hey guys, tonight we drift somewhere few humans have walked, and even fewer have understood. You're not just here to fall asleep. You're here to wander to the bottom of the world. Antarctica, the final white silence. A place so vast, so locked and cold it might as well be a second moon. You're wrapped in layers, hood up, goggles fogged, and yet the wind slices through like it knows your soft spots. Beneath your feet, just a casual 4 kilometers of ancient compressed snow. Beneath that, well, that's the question, isn't it? Is there a hidden world below the ice? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're still awake, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this little podcast travels while you don't. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of it all. The continent feels less like land and more like a sleeping god covered in frost. There are no cities here, no permanent homes. Just research stations full of sleepy scientists and the occasional penguin that couldn't care less you're here. The sun hovers low, bleeding gold across a horizon that never ends. It's silent in a way that eats your thoughts. Every breath steams. Every step squeaks against snow that's older than your grandparents. The air is so dry it could drink you whole. There's something humbling about being here. Like standing in the world's unfinished corner, where creation paused and forgot to hit resume. Antarctica wasn't always this way, though. Scientists agree it was once green, forests, rivers, maybe even marsupials bouncing around. But that was millions of years ago, before it slid to the bottom of the planet like a lost jigsaw piece. Now it's a frozen crust. And as you walk across its glittering surface, you can't help but wonder, what got buried before the cold came? You kneel, press a gloved hand to the snow. Below this point are layers and layers of time. Compressed snow turning to ice, turning to mystery. It's a planet within a planet. And like all good things in life, the really weird stuff is beneath the surface. Here's the wild part. 70% of the planet's fresh water is locked in Antarctica's ice sheet. That's a lot of melted snow cones. But beneath it, there's not just bedrock. There are valleys, lakes, and river systems no one had any business finding under all that ice. Yet, they're there, quietly defying logic. You know, Lake Vostok's coming up soon, it'll get its moment. But there are over 400 subglacial lakes hiding under Antarctica's icy belly. Some of them are connected by rivers that flow in total darkness. Imagine being a water droplet, trapped under a moving ceiling of ice for 10 million years. That's a long time to think about your choices. As you trudge on, it's weirdly comforting how little your phone matters out here. No signal, no pings, just you and an endless white plain that doesn't care if you flossed this morning. Every now and then a distant crunch makes you turn, false alarm. No one here but you, the cold, and a few stubborn seals that look like they've seen some things. The thing about Antarctica is that it's not just frozen water. It's frozen time. The deeper you go through ice cores, seismic data, satellite scans, the more the layers become like pages in a history book you were never meant to read. But now you're reading, slowly, carefully, like someone afraid of what might be revealed if they turn too fast. There's also something suspiciously convenient about how hard it is to explore. Between the howling katabatic winds, crevasses big enough to swallow trucks, and temperatures that can flash freeze your eyelids. It's like nature put up a big do not disturb sign. And you of course chose to ignore it, bold move. Still, not all mysteries are monsters. Some are simply ancient, still waiting. You spot a distant outpost ahead, just a dot on the snow, barely more than a blip. It hums with quiet energy, solar panels gleaming in the low sun. This is where the data streams from satellites meet human hands, where theories brew in mugs of lukewarm coffee, where someone last week probably said, "Hey, what if there's something under that ridge?" You smile, because that someone is probably you now. History tells us humans have always suspected there's more under Antarctica than just ice. Ptolemy, the Greco-Roman scholar from 2nd century Alexandria, believed the southern hemisphere had to have a vast terra australis to balance the landmass of the north. Balance, symmetry, cosmic feng shui. It made sense. And while Ptolemy never saw Antarctica, His belief hung around for centuries. Historians still argue whether ancient maps hint at early contact with the southern polar regions. Were they cartographic dreams? Or did someone see something long ago and pass it down through suspiciously accurate parchment? We'll get to that too, but for now, you stare out at an expanse that could hide anything. A civilization, a secret base, a slumbering thing with scales and too many teeth. Kidding, mostly. The point is, there's room here. Room for lost empires, forgotten lakes, unfathomable creatures. Antarctica is too big, too untouched to be empty. That's just not how nature works. Even the penguins seem to keep secrets. Look at them waddling all innocent. They know something. Probably running a subterranean ice empire and laughing at us. You exhale. Let your breath fog your goggles. The snow crunches underfoot as you press forward. Because you didn't come to Antarctica just to freeze. You came to listen. And the ice? The ice is ready to whisper back. The wind hushes now, almost like it stepped aside to let something more ancient speak. You keep walking, but your footsteps feel quieter. The sky overhead is a sheet of silver, stretched so thin it almost doesn't look real. Everything around you is white and still. Even the occasional gust swirls like a lazy dancer, not really in a rush to get anywhere. You're far enough from the outpost now that the only thing left is you, and the endless plain of ancient memory. It's funny how silence can feel heavy, like it's made of something. You could reach out and scoop it in your hands, pack it like snow, and in this silence you start to feel it, that presence. Not a ghost, not a monster, just weight, history, something watching without eyes. You reach a ridge, nothing dramatic. Just a subtle rise in the snow like a frozen ripple. You crest it slowly, each step deliberate, like you're walking across someone's sleeping form. Below there's a stretch of land where the snow has settled differently. Flatter, denser, smoother. It's one of those places where the ice seems wrong. Not dangerous wrong, but wrong in a way that makes you tilt your head. You kneel and run your gloved hand across it. Your fingers brush not snow, but something harder beneath, solid. Ice, yes, but ancient and layered like glass forged in slow time. You lie down gently, ear to the surface, as if expecting to hear a heartbeat. You do not, but you feel something. See, the thing about Antarctica is it whispers. Not in words, obviously. That would be terrifying. But in feelings, in pressure, in the knowledge that this place has held secrets longer than our species has existed. Your mind drifts, carried on that silence like a leaf floating over deep water. Back in the early 20th century, British explorer Ernest Shackleton described Antarctica as awful in its strength and serene in its indifference. You get it now. This place doesn't care about you. It's not cruel. Just quiet, patient, still. And beneath this frozen calm, there are hollows, cavities that stretch for miles. Scientists using ice-penetrating radar have mapped enormous subglacial valleys, some longer than the Grand Canyon. Seriously, Grand Canyon under ice. You lie still imagining that colossal void below you. If it weren't for the crushing weight of the ice, you could fall through and keep falling for a long, long time. The air would go thinner, colder, until even your dreams turned crystalline. It's in places like this that researchers hear strange echoes. Not creepy voices or horror movie screeches, just echoes. Long reverberations when seismic pulses are sent into the ground. Some of them bounce back wrong. Off angles. Patterns not normally seen in nature. Historians still argue whether these returns are just data, noise, or indications of man-made structures. Yeah, I said it. Of course, most of the academic community rolls their eyes at that, but even those eye rollers can't explain why some regions bounce. Radar in perfectly symmetrical angles, triangles, ridges, domes. Nature loves chaos, not clean geometry, so the whispers continue. You roll onto your back and stare up at the low sky. It's turned the color of old metal, gray-blue with a faint shimmer like frozen mercury. The sun sits at the horizon like it's taking a lunch break. You can't remember the last time you blinked. Time melts here even if nothing else does. Above you, satellites float in silence, always watching. They've taken photos of mystery circles in the snow, perfect rings hundreds of feet wide that appear and disappear without explanation. Ice formations? Alien crop circles? Giant penguin roller discos? Who knows? But some of those circles have been spotted, directly above where radar pings found underground heat signatures. You know, the ones we'll talk more about soon. Coincidence? Maybe. Antarctica's full of those. Coincidences stacked like pancakes under an endless syrup of snow. You sit up and sip from your flask. The water's slightly slushy, which feels like a small miracle. Your breath fogs out slowly. A shape moves on the horizon. It's just a snow devil, one of those lazy spirals that dances for no one. But it draws your eyes to something else. The silence has a texture now. That's the only way you can describe it. It's not just quiet, it's structured. Like an empty cathedral, the kind where every step echoes and even your thoughts walk softer. You remember that under this place tunnels have been found. Not by archaeologists, but by geophysicists and satellite teams. Natural caves, probably, but some stretch in straight lines. For miles. Nature can do that. Lava tubes, fissures, erosion channels. But some of these tunnels aren't volcanic or tectonic. They're just there. And then there's the air bubbles. Yeah, let's talk about those for a sec. In ice core samples taken from deep under the sheet, some of the trapped gas bubbles contain atmospheric compositions that don't match modern Earth. Oxygen ratios that suggest something odd was happening down there in the past. Are these just markers of ancient climates? Probably. But every now and then, a paper floats around asking why those layers show unusual isotopes or elevated metallic dust, hinting at events, meteor strikes, solar storms, or something less explainable. Historians still argue whether these anomalies point to regular climatic cycles or something more targeted. You rise and begin to walk again, your boots muffled by fresh powder. The ground hums just slightly beneath you, or maybe that's just your blood echoing in your ears. It's hard to tell anymore. You pass a snow-covered rise where old tent poles jut from the ground like frozen bones. A failed expedition? A weather camp long since buried? Who knows? Antarctica eats memory for breakfast. Still, every now and then it coughs something back up. A journal, a sled, a boot still laced. Each artifact a breadcrumb left on the icy trail of curiosity. You follow that trail now. Not really sure where it ends, but you can feel it, can't you? The silence. It's not empty. It's full of waiting. You trudge on, boots softly crunching into powdered time, until something in the wind shifts. It doesn't howl, not anymore. It hums, a low vibration barely there, like someone whispering under their breath in a faraway room. You pause. There's nothing on the horizon. Just the white. Always the white. But beneath your boots, things are different. You're standing above Lake Vostok now. Well, not directly above the lake, it's 4 kilometers down. 4,000 meters of pressure-packed ice between you and what might be the most untouched body of water on Earth. Think about that. There are oceans on this planet that have seen more human fingerprints than this lake has. Lake Vostok is one of those discoveries that science didn't go looking for. It sort of stumbled into it. Back in the 1970s and 80s, scientists started using radar to scan through Antarctica's ice. And they kept getting strange returns, a perfectly smooth, flat signal beneath the surface. At first they thought it was a glitch, but the shape held and it was too flat, too consistent to be anything other than water. Turns out Lake Vostok is about the size of Lake Ontario. It's been sealed off for up to 15 million years, trapped under a layer of ice so thick and old that it predates the human species by a few casual evolutionary cycles. It's not frozen either, thanks to geothermal heat radiating up from the Earth's crust. That plus pressure keeps it in liquid form. A warm pulse in the coldest place imaginable. And here's the kicker. We've barely touched it. In 2012, after more than 2 decades of drilling, a Russian team finally reached the surface of the lake. You'd think it would be like breaking into a tomb. Steam rising, strange creatures bubbling up, Maybe a disappointed ancient being groaning. Took you long enough. But nope, it was quieter than that. The Russians took water samples, then quickly sealed the borehole. There were concerns about contaminating the lake with surface microbes, and also the unsettling question of what might come up. Because whatever's been living down there has been doing it without sunlight, air, or anyone bothering them, for millions of years. That's not just evolution. That's isolation so complete it's almost sacred. You imagine standing at the edge of that black water. No ripples, no sound. Just thick mineral-rich liquid, warmed by the belly of the earth and held still by time. It's the closest we've got to an alien ocean without leaving our planet. And what might be down there? Microbes for sure. Probably extremophiles. Tiny things that eat rock and breathe chemicals. But that's the tame theory. Others think there could be larger forms of life. Strange crustaceans, bioluminescent worms, creatures that evolved in total darkness and silence, creatures that see heat the way we see light. Historians still argue whether drilling into the lake was premature. Some believe it was a triumph of exploration. Others think it was like poking a sleeping bear just to see what would happen. And let's be honest, you wouldn't open a 15-million-year-old fridge without at least sniffing cautiously first. A fringe theory floats quietly around late-night forums and the weirder corners of science journals. It suggests that Lake Vostok isn't just a geological oddity, but a preserved ecosystem from a pre-glacial civilization. That perhaps when Antarctica was green and lush, something lived there. Not just deer and trees, but people, or something like people. And when the Great Freeze came, they, whoever they were, retreated downward. Of course, that's not the mainstream view. But hey, neither were round Earths or gravity once upon a time. You pull your jacket tighter. A sudden breeze kicks up, blowing loose snow in a spiral around your legs. It's like the lake knows you're up here, thinking about it. Maybe it's sending bubbles of thought up the borehole. Maybe it's dreaming. Just north of Vostok, there's something else. Something researchers only talk about after 2 cups of tea and a long sigh. Magnetic anomalies. Back in the late 1990s, satellites picked up strange magnetic signatures under the ice near the lake. Like really strange. Normally, rocks and ice have pretty tame magnetic profiles. But this spot? It hummed like a tuning fork. Some say it's a natural rock formation. Others suspect something else, a structure, a craft, a city. That last one's the spiciest version, the frozen alien base theory. According to that line of thinking, what the satellites picked up wasn't natural at all, but metallic, engineered, symmetrical, deliberate. And guess what? It's in almost the same region where one of the earliest Soviet expeditions lost contact with their team for several hours, then reported strange lights in the sky. Do we believe it? Not necessarily. Do we sleep a little worse when we think about it? You bet. Even mainstream scientists get quiet when you bring up Lake Vostok. Not because they think it's full of monsters, but because it represents something we almost never get anymore, a true unknown. No photos, no sonar maps, just a dark, ancient body of water humming softly beneath the feet of a very small group of humans who know it exists but still don't understand it. It's rare that we get to not know something in the modern age. But here, under 4 kilometers of ice, there's a pocket of mystery the size of a small country, and it's waiting. You crouch once more, brushing away the snow. You imagine your fingers could melt through the layers. Ice, permafrost, ancient silt, until they dip into the warm, still lake. You imagine it notices, not in a monstrous way, just a quiet awareness. The way a sleeping cat twitches when you pass too close. One day, maybe we'll drill deeper. Send down little subs, capture the first footage of a thing with no eyes and too many legs. Or maybe we'll decide to leave it alone. Either way, tonight you stand above it, listening, feeling. And if the ice hums back, well, as you were warned. You start to descend gently down a sloping ridge. The ice underfoot grippy with powder. The wind has stopped again, completely. The kind of stillness that makes you wonder if the world took a deep breath and forgot to let it out. And beneath your feet, remember Lake Vostok? Its waters are just the beginning, because it turns out that life doesn't need sunlight, or warmth, or even kindness. It just needs time and a chance. Under Antarctica's ice, in the darkest, coldest, most isolated pockets of the planet, something is alive. And not just in Lake Vostok. Over the past few decades, researchers have managed to retrieve samples from other subglacial lakes and streams, small ones compared to Vostok, but easier to access. What they found in that inky black water was frankly a little unsettling. Microbes, alive, breathing, dividing, going about their invisible business, like it was just another Tuesday in microbial suburbia. These tiny organisms don't use sunlight for energy. Instead, they use chemosynthesis, a fancy way of saying, hey, I'll just eat minerals instead of light. They break down rocks, suck up sulfur, and do other things your high school biology teacher definitely didn't cover. They thrive in a pitch, black pressure cooker with temperatures just barely above freezing. Honestly, they're kind of living the introvert dream. Historians still argue whether this counts as alien-like life. But one thing's for sure, these extremophiles are so weird, so robust. They're now used as analogs for potential life on Europa and Enceladus, icy moons orbiting Jupiter and Saturn, which means that exploring these lakes isn't just about Earth anymore, it's about other worlds. But the most charmingly creepy part? These microbes are old. Some studies estimate that subglacial populations could have been isolated for millions of years, evolving on their own little paths while the rest of Earth dealt with dinosaurs, meteors, and whatever 2020 was. And unlike humans, they never once tried to invent reality TV. You take a deep breath, even though you're safely above ground. The thought of ancient life squirming beneath you, untouched, unseen, is enough to make your skin feel tight in your suit. Still, part of you marvels at it, because if microbes can survive in those conditions, what else could? Now, we're not talking aliens or giant squid with political agendas, though that would spice up international relations. But it opens the door to multicellular organisms, things with tissues, nervous systems, instincts. Think small crustaceans, maybe jellyfish-like creatures adapted to pure darkness. Bioluminescence, anyone? Let's be honest, when has nature ever kept it simple? Even in our regular oceans, scientists regularly discover species so weird they might as well come with their own theme. Music, blobfish, anglerfish, deep-sea polychaetes that look like feather boas had a nightmare. Now imagine a version of those that's been evolving for 10 million years in complete isolation. You wouldn't recognize it. You wouldn't even see it. It might not need eyes, or color, or a sense of humor. Just function. Just survival. Still, survival breeds design. You crouch again not because you saw something, but because you felt something. A quiet curiosity underfoot. No tremor, no vibration. Just that ticklish sense in the back of your brain that something is paying attention from below. You laugh softly. The cold carries it nowhere. Here's a quirky little tidbit for you. In 2018, scientists drilling into Antarctic ice accidentally dropped a camera into a borehole, and it recorded footage of a strange amoeba-like creature drifting past. It wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't even supposed to be alive. The footage quality was bad, and no one's entirely sure what it was. But it looked purposeful, organic, wiggly. No follow-up was released. Cue the dramatic music. Of course, the rational explanation is probably simple. Contamination, unknown species caught in an unknown current, or maybe a hallucination induced by too many granola bars and not enough daylight. But still, that footage lingers in researchers' heads like a riddle that never quite gets solved. You keep walking, passing a stretch of exposed blue ice. It's different from the soft powder you've been crunching through. This stuff is ancient, compressed so tight it reflects the sky in strange hues, lavender, cobalt, glass green. Beneath it, if you could see, you'd find trapped microbial colonies, some of which haven't seen light in hundreds of thousands of years. Some of them are still viable. They've actually revived bacteria from Antarctic ice cores and watched them wiggle back to life in a lab dish. Imagine being asleep for 10,000 years and waking up to find yourself in a petri dish surrounded by lab interns and pipettes. Not ideal. And yet they stretch, they divide, they start again. Life is weirdly persistent, which makes you wonder, if simple life can survive there, might complex life once have? Is it impossible to think that in a warmer, wetter Antarctic past, there could have been larger organisms that, when the cold came, followed the warmth downward? Maybe into caves, maybe into the water, maybe just into hiding. You don't need fossils to wonder. You just need possibility. And that's what Antarctica's full of. Scientists estimate that more than 90% of the continent's subglacial landscape has never been directly explored. That's like walking through a mansion and only ever seeing the entryway. And in that unlit mansion, something might be living. Or just as likely, something might have died very slowly a long time ago and left behind bones, ruins, perhaps even languages scratched into mineral walls. Too far? Maybe, but in this place, where the silence is thicker than sleep and the snow feels sentient, even the fringe doesn't feel all that fringy. You pause on a rise, letting your breath fog around your face. The sky is darker now, purpling with a faint aurora. The kind of quiet light that makes you forget how late it is. Time doesn't work right here. Distance either. You close your eyes just for a moment, and beneath your feet, miles below, the tiniest flicker of life might also be resting, waiting, wiggling. And it doesn't need you. But you definitely need it. You press forward across the ridgeline, where the wind has sculpted shallow drifts into elegant waves, like the ocean paused mid-motion and froze in place. Beneath your boots, the world slants downward again, gradual, unthreatening, but the deeper you go, the more the feeling returns. You're walking across something that wasn't always just ice and rock. You pause, sliding your gloved hand from side to side across your chest-mounted scanner. No readings you can interpret, just a soft green glow blinking with patience. The terrain here is subtle but distinct. There's a rhythm to the ground beneath you, a regular rise and fall, a pattern. Nothing nature hasn't done before, of course. Nature loves ridges, but every few steps, you feel the faintest dip, the shallowest slope, repeating at just enough intervals to raise one cold eyebrow. And that's when you remember the radar scans. Back in the 1990s, scientists at NASA and the British Antarctic Survey began scanning beneath Antarctica's thick ice sheets using airborne radar. What they found wasn't just lakes or rivers. It was entire subglacial mountain ranges, valleys, plateaus. The most famous, the Gomburtsev Mountains, about the size of the European Alps, completely buried beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. Nobody even knew. They were there until technology peeked through the frost. Historians still argue whether these formations are simply the result of ancient tectonics or if their oddly geometric alignment, perfect rows, consistent intervals, clean contours, suggest something more organized. You run a hand across your hood, adjusting your goggles as the wind picks up again. Ahead, the horizon flickers slightly in the low light. Maybe it's heat distortion, or maybe it's memory. Because here's the thing. Some of those radar scans returned more than just shapes. They returned angles. You know, nature doesn't often bother with precision. Fractals, sure. Spiral shells? Absolutely. But 90-degree corners deep beneath solid ice, that's the kind of thing that makes geologists sit very still in their chairs. In one scan near the Thiel Trough, south of Lake Vostok but not far, researchers noted a repeating pattern that resembled walls spaced evenly, rectilinear shapes, like the blueprint of an ancient settlement. If you blurred it through 4 kilometers of glacial interference, of course nobody's calling it a city. Officially. Unofficially, the theories range from natural basalt formations to buried alien architecture to Atlantis, but chillier. You chuckle to yourself, because honestly, doesn't everyone want to find Atlantis under the ice? It's like the universal fantasy, forgotten knowledge, entombed brilliance, something grand and lost, and just waiting for a curious soul with a flashlight and too much free time. Back in 2002, a peculiar event added fuel to the fire. A European satellite, passing over the Princess Elizabeth Land region, recorded strange infrared anomalies, patterns of heat that didn't line up with known geothermal sources. That, combined with unusual radar readings, kicked up whispers of underground structures. Researchers downplayed it, of course. But online? Oh, they had a field day. There were rumors of dome-like chambers, vast and perfectly symmetrical, buried miles beneath the ice. Natural caves, maybe, but why so round? Why so perfectly centered along intersecting ice faults? That's the kind of coincidence that makes you squint. And then there's the Wilkes land gravity anomaly. You remember this one? The satellite data showing a massive gravitational irregularity deep beneath East Antarctica. It's about 300 miles wide and could be the remnant of a huge asteroid impact, or, according to certain less than mainstream thinkers, it could be something else entirely. Something hollow. Something constructed. Fringe theorists love this stuff. Some say it's a crashed alien mothership, half buried and long forgotten. Others argue it's the upper dome of a buried megastructure, like a pyramid only flipped and flattened over millennia. You glance upward. The sky hasn't changed, but your thoughts have. Even if these patterns are just geological quirks, their existence is a reminder Antarctica isn't just flat ice. It's a three-dimensional world, a sunken topography shaped by forces we barely understand. And sometimes, even science admits it doesn't have all the answers. You kneel again and press your palm against the snow. It's smooth, not glassy, not artificial, but quiet. And in that quiet you start to imagine, what if tens of millions of years ago, before Antarctica was icebound, a civilization grew here? Not advanced in the sci-fi way, no flying cars, no pyramids lined with gold, but structured, settled. Maybe they built in stone. Maybe they tunneled deep to escape the coming cold. Maybe when the freeze came, they went underground, leaving only their shapes behind. Historians still argue whether early hominids ever ventured this far south, but that's assuming humans were the first to build anything. You exhale slowly, mist curling in front of you. A voice in your mind, friendly and sarcastic, says you're letting the theories get to you. And maybe it's right, but maybe it's also wrong, because geometric patterns don't appear randomly, and when multiple radar passes from different institutions yield the same angles, the same shadows, the same hums beneath the ice, you don't just ignore it. You listen. The problem is, you can't dig here, at least not easily. The ice fights you. It shifts, refreezes, crushes. Your tunnel's like a bored giant smashing. Legos, and the logistics? Just transporting a drill costs more than most space missions. So for now, all we have is radar. And radar doesn't give secrets. It gives riddles. You rise to your feet, brushing snow from your knees. Behind you, your path is already vanishing, smoothed by light flurries. You half expect to turn around and see nothing but unbroken snow. And in a way, that's what Antarctica wants. To be unread. To be unwalked. To be forgotten. But not by you. You're here now, following the lines, tracing the geometry with your thoughts. Down there, far below, something waits in rows, aligned, patient. And when we finally break through, it won't be with fanfare or trumpets. It'll be with a soft hiss of steam and the quiet click of a lens cap coming off. The wind presses sideways now, curling lazily around your parka as you step across a ridgeline toward flatter ground. The snow has softened here, less resistance beneath your boots, like the earth is exhaling below the surface. Your breath fogs again, drifting toward the wide-open nothing in front of you, and you realize you've reached the kind of place that doesn't make noise even when it should. This, oddly enough, is where the weirdest stories begin. You know the ones, the whispers about Nazis in Antarctica. Now stay with me. This isn't a History Channel rerun with dramatic violin stabs and a guy yelling aliens in a basement. This is real history, with a few uncomfortable blank spots. In 1938, the Germans launched an Antarctic expedition, not for penguins, Not for science fairs. For reasons. Officially, they were scouting whaling routes and establishing potential supply lines. Unofficially, well, it gets foggy. They sailed south aboard a ship called the Schwabenland, packed with planes, survey gear, and a weirdly large supply of aluminum flags to drop across the icy terrain. And drop them they did. Dozens of swastika-marked emblems, fluttering down onto what they renamed Neuschwabenland. New Swabia. Okay, weird flex, but fine. What raised eyebrows both then and now is what followed. After the expedition, they went quiet. Too quiet. No real scientific reports. No follow-up surveys. Just a handful of vague observations and a whole lot of shrugged shoulders. And yet, after the war, some post-Nazi whispers began circulating. The idea that Germany had established a base in Antarctica. Base du Onde. Now you're thinking, why would anyone build a secret base in the coldest, most inhospitable place on Earth? Excellent question. But fringe theorists love this setup. It's remote, isolated, hard to track, and covered by miles of ice that conveniently hides whatever you don't want found. The theories blossomed like mold in a damp bunker. Stories emerged about U-boats, German submarines, heading south after Berlin fell. Some claimed Hitler himself had fled to Antarctica instead of, the less glamorous bunker ending. Others speculated about secret tunnels, geothermal chambers, and even Nazi flying saucers hidden beneath the ice. Yes, flying saucers. According to some of the spicier corners of the internet, the Third Reich discovered something strange in Antarctica. Ancient technology, or perhaps something not entirely human, and reverse-engineered it into what would become the first Haunebu disk. A craft shaped like a bell, capable of vertical flight, perhaps even space travel, or at least very ambitious hoverboarding. Mainstream historians? Not buying it. They point out rightly that Germany was barely holding itself together in 1945. Building space frisbees in Antarctica wasn't exactly a budget priority. And yet, there were strange moments. In 1946, just 1 year after the war ended, the United States launched Operation High Jump. It was the largest Antarctic military expedition in history. 13 ships, 33 aircraft, 4700 personnel, ostensibly to train troops and test equipment in extreme conditions. Because Florida just doesn't have enough glaciers. But some believe that the real goal was to locate and dismantle Nazi remnants. There were even whispers that Admiral Richard Byrd, the leader of the mission, encountered something unexpected. During later interviews, he made vague references to flying craft capable of speeds never before imagined. Did he mean planes, UFOs, bad hot air balloon experiences? Historians still argue whether these quotes were mistranslated, misremembered, or part of a disinformation campaign. But the idea stuck. And once an idea sticks to Antarctica, it freezes there permanently. You look out across the plain now. Nothing visible. No rusting hangars, no hidden saucers. Just snow, as it always is. But the thing about Antarctica is, you don't need visual proof to feel the weight of stories. The silence holds them, suspends them, like frost clinging to glass. There's a specific spot some researchers obsess over, Queen Maud Land, on the eastern edge of the continent. The geography is dramatic, towering peaks jutting from ice like cathedral spires. Perfect place for a hidden entrance. If you believe the maps floating around conspiracy forums, some claim to have seen satellite images with blacked-out regions, suspiciously geometric shadows, or hangar-like indentations along cliff faces. Is it real? Probably not. But the myth of Base 211 keeps showing up in novels, movies, declassified memos, and even a few sketchy interviews with ex-military personnel who weren't supposed to talk. It's become a legend, a frozen Roswell with fewer cacti and more snow blindness. And let's not forget the modern twist. Antarctica remains curiously restricted, despite being governed by the Antarctic Treaty, which promotes peaceful research and cooperation. There are severe limitations on where civilians can go, what can be flown and what can be explored. You can't just grab a shovel, board a plane, and start poking around in the Thiel Mountains. Some say that's just logistical caution. Others aren't so sure. You crouch behind a rock now, more out of reflex than necessity. The cold presses in close. Somewhere under your boots, miles down, there's a layer of bedrock warmed by the Earth's core. A perfect place, some theorize, for caverns. Natural ones large enough to build into. Hidden by time. Protected by remoteness. One theory suggests that these chambers could even be filled with geothermal lakes. Shielded from the ice. Warmed enough to grow food, generate power. Maybe even build a quiet empire where no one can hear you goose step. But let's be real. If there was a Nazi base down here, it's probably just a frozen mess of busted generators and old canned beans by now. If anything, no armies. No saucers. Just echoes and rust. Still, there's something about this part of Antarctica that makes your skin tighten. Not fear exactly, just that instinctual goosebump tingle that suggests something happened here. Something strange. And maybe, just maybe, something was left behind. You stand again, brushing snow from your gloves. The world is still, and your mind spins through timelines, rumors, and that odd shape you saw on the horizon a few minutes ago. Probably a trick of the light. Probably. You step back onto the open flat, boots creaking against the dense crust beneath fresh powder. The last few hours have been strange, but strangely believable. Lakes sealed off for millennia. Magnetic anomalies, buried ridgelines that echo just a little too perfectly. It's all weird, sure, but still earthbound. Still sort of scientific. So naturally, now's the perfect time to take a gentle tumble into the deep, cozy rabbit hole of Hollow Earth theory. Yep, you knew it was coming. Maybe you hoped we'd skip it. But this is a sleep podcast, and nothing lulls you into slumber quite like the idea that you're standing on the thin crust, above an entire hidden world. Take a breath. Let's be clear. The Hollow Earth theory is not part of mainstream science. It hasn't been since we figured out how gravity works, but it's persistent like glitter after a birthday party. It pops up in every century, every genre, every whispered tale that starts with, "But what if?" The earliest versions go way back. Ancient mythologies often describe underworlds, not in the spooky, horned demon way, but as inward realms. The Greeks had Hades, the Hindus had Patala, and the Norse believed in Svartalfheim. A hidden world beneath the surface, full of secrets and strange beings. But it wasn't until the 17th century that people started asking, hey, what if it's literally hollow in there? A scientist named Edmund Halley, yes, the comet guy, proposed in 1692 that Earth might be made of concentric shells with atmosphere between them, sort of like a gobstopper but terrifying. He wasn't joking. He thought each layer might be inhabited, glowing from within thanks to some internal sun. Honestly, 10 out of 10 for creativity, minus a few for physics. Flash forward to the 19th century and things get even cozier. A man named John Cleve Sims, Jr. was absolutely convinced that the Earth was hollow, and that you could access its lush inner lands via enormous holes at the North and South Poles. His Sims holes, as they were lovingly called, were said to be hundreds of miles wide. He even lobbied Congress to fund an expedition. Surprisingly, Congress said no, which in hindsight might be their smartest move. Still, the idea grew. Novels appeared. Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth fired up imaginations with tales of underground seas, prehistoric beasts, and lava that wasn't nearly as kill-you-dead as it should have been. Verne didn't believe in it necessarily, but fiction has a way of sounding truer than fact when you read it at 2 a.m. with a blanket over your head. But here's the part where Antarctica tiptoes back into the story. In 1947, Admiral Richard Byrd, yes, the same one from Operation High Jump, allegedly took part in a secret flight over the South Pole. According to a highly disputed diary that may or may not be real, he reported flying into a polar opening and discovering a warm, lush land filled with animals, forests, and a highly advanced inner Earth civilization. Now let's pump the brakes. The diary's origins are murky, to put it kindly. Most scholars agree it's either a fabrication or misinterpretation of Bird's actual logs, but Hollow Earth believers treat it like gospel. According to their version, Bird met peaceful inner Earth beings who warned humanity about our obsession with nuclear weapons, because of course they did. Historians still argue whether the diary was forged posthumously or cobbled together from existing log fragments. What's clear is this: the Hollow Earth theory refused to die. It just mutated. By the time the Cold War heated up, Antarctica had become the new frontier for all things mysterious. The continent's inaccessibility, its towering mountain ranges buried in ice, and its near total absence of permanent human presence made it the perfect blank canvas. And the Hollow Earth crowd painted with thick, glowing brushes. They claimed the South Pole concealed a vast entrance to the inner world. That governments, particularly the US, Russia, and perhaps even those elusive post-war Nazis knew about it, and were keeping it secret. Why? Pick your flavor. Alien civilizations, ancient power sources, interdimensional rifts, even dinosaurs. One theory suggests that Antarctica's inner sanctum contains a microclimate so stable that Jurassic-era fauna still flourish there, living their best lives completely unaware they're someone's bedtime theory. It's a lot, right? But as you stand here now, brushing frost from your sleeves, it's hard not to feel just a little open to the possibility. Because the truth is, we don't know everything that's underneath the ice. Most of Antarctica remains unmapped in fine detail. We rely on satellite scans and ground-penetrating radar, but we haven't exactly dug deep with pickaxes and spelunking ropes. So sure, there's probably not a second sun glowing in Earth's belly, but could there be massive caverns, warm from geothermal heat, filled with strange rock formations, unique ecosystems, or long-forgotten ruins? That's a bit more plausible. Even now, scientists have documented enormous ice caves in Antarctica. Some stretch for miles, some maintain temperatures well above freezing, warmed from below by volcanic activity. These are real, measurable, walkable, at least for penguins, and some researchers believe those caves may be large enough and stable enough to support plant and microbial life. One study near Mount Erebus even found genetic traces of unknown organisms in the soil samples from its volcanic ice caves. Not evidence of hollow kingdoms, but something. A whisper of the unfamiliar. You stop and tilt your head, as if you might hear footsteps echoing from below. Nothing, just snow shifting. But for a moment it felt like the earth was breathing beneath you. Here's a quirky thought. In a world where we've mapped the surface of Mars better than the ocean floor, maybe it makes sense that Earth's most hidden continent would still hold a few secrets. And whether those secrets involve dinosaurs, UFOs, or just really weird rock formations, they all start the same way, with a hole in the ice and a willingness to wonder. You glance back across the ice shelf. You're not ready to jump into a glowing vortex to meet subterranean sages just yet. But the idea that somewhere deep down the Earth isn't entirely solid, that maybe, just maybe, it's cradling something ancient and alive in its shadowy core, yeah, that's worth a few more steps. You crest another subtle rise, not steep, but enough to pull a breath from your lungs that fogs the air like a whisper. The sun hasn't moved. It never really does here. Just hangs low, casting long shadows that stretch across the snow like reaching fingers. The ice beneath you is quiet, but you're starting to realize something. It isn't still. You pause, shift your weight slightly. There it is again. Warmth. Not much, barely noticeable, but the kind of subtle heat that makes the snow feel slightly looser underfoot. And it's not coming from the sky. It's coming from below. Which makes no sense, right? You're standing on a continent where temperatures drop to 89 degrees C. The coldest place on Earth. Even penguins are like, this might be too much. And yet under the thickest layers of ice there is heat. Not just any heat. Localized geothermal anomalies. Pockets of rising warmth from the Earth's crust, concentrated in places they shouldn't be. Take Mount Erebus, for example, Antarctica's most famous volcano. It's active, erupting every now and then like it forgot it was supposed to be frozen. Surrounding it are steam vents, lava lakes, and underground ice caves that remain surprisingly cozy year-round. Warm enough to melt a Snickers bar anyway. But that's not the weird part. You kneel down and press a gloved hand against the surface. The wind has gone dead again. The snow is thin here, like the skin of the continent is stretched taut. Beneath that skin, something glows. In 2018, a group of scientists studying West Antarctica found massive heat fluxes. That's science speak for way more warmth than expected. Using radar and satellite thermal imaging, they detected hotspots where the geothermal output was strong enough to melt ice from below. These weren't near known volcanoes, and they weren't uniform. They popped up in specific regions, beneath thick sheets of ice, far from tectonic fault lines, and nowhere near Mount Erebus's dramatic cone. Historians still argue whether these thermal pulses are natural, volcanic events, or something more unusual. One theory posits that the crust beneath Antarctica is thinner in some areas, allowing magma to rise closer to the surface. Another theory, less popular in faculty lounges but beloved by theorists, suggests the heat may be artificial. Artificial, like generated? Some speculate that underground energy sources, possibly long abandoned or self-sustaining, could be giving off heat signatures detectable from space. Think fusion systems. Think geothermal engineering. Think something down there old and quietly humming away. You adjust your gloves, flexing your fingers as if they might feel the pulse through layers of cloth and snow. Nothing. But the idea is there now, planted, growing. It doesn't help that these anomalies often correlate with the same regions where radar has pinged strange geometric formations, magnetic anomalies, or unexplained underground voids. Coincidence? Antarctica's full of them. That's its whole thing. You glance around. The landscape here is subtle but weird. No hills. Just long, flat stretches interrupted by slight humps. Like something underneath trying to stay hidden but not doing a great job. There's a theory that under these zones lie ice-covered caverns, vast enough to contain entire ecosystems. And with enough geothermal energy, those ecosystems might not just exist, they might thrive. Which leads to one of the weirdest, most wonderful facts in all this. Antarctica has rivers, underground ones, flowing in the dark under pressure, lubricating glaciers like veins in a sleeping titan. Scientists have traced their paths with radar. Some stretch hundreds of kilometers, connecting subglacial lakes like ancient trade routes. Warm water, rich in minerals, moving slowly but surely through darkness. And warmth? Warmth means possibility. You remember a fringe study that tried to map these hotspots in 3 dimensions. The model resembled a glowing nervous system, pulses of energy branching through the ice like synapses firing. One glowing dot in particular sat directly beneath a region of East Antarctica, previously scanned for magnetic anomalies. That spot? Still classified in certain data sets. Of course, classification doesn't always mean secrets. Sometimes it just means we didn't finish writing the report. But in a place like Antarctica, where access is limited, everything feels like a cover-up. You shift your footing. The ground beneath you is firmer here, ice over bedrock probably, but it gives the faintest sense of depth. Not hollowness exactly, just space, like standing over a cathedral with no lights. And maybe that's the most haunting part of all this, not knowing what lies below, not even in a mythical ancient civilization sense, just not knowing where the heat is coming from, what it's warming, what might be changing because of it. Because here's the thing, no one really talks about the warmth under Antarctica is melting the ice from the bottom up. Yeah. While we focus on atmospheric climate change, and rightfully so, there's a quiet revolution happening deep below. Glaciers once thought immobile or shifting. Ice sheets are fracturing, not because of sunshine, but because of internal heat. Which raises a cheeky little question. Is it Earth's natural heat? Or something waking up? I know. Dramatic. But when the ice starts melting from beneath, when radar scans show voids forming where none existed, and when temperature readings start climbing in sealed subglacial pockets, You have to wonder if the planet is turning over in its sleep, or worse, if it's dreaming something awake. You place your hand down again, just for the feeling. Still cold, but not the bone-deep cold you expected. Somewhere in this vast frozen cathedral, a heater is running, and no one knows who left it on. The horizon has softened now, less defined, like the edge of a dream. Your breath comes slower, the air a little thinner. Or maybe it's just your mind wandering somewhere deeper than the ice beneath you. The silence returns, but not empty. It's full of things not said. You stop walking, just for a moment. Because this is where the stories get strange. You remember hearing it once, whispered over static in a late-night radio show, or maybe buried in some forgotten forum thread. The idea that something fell into Antarctica. Not recently. A long, long time ago, and not something natural. The story begins, as these things often do, with a crash. In 2006, a team of scientists working near the East Antarctic ice sheet picked up something unusual, a signal buried deep in the glacial crust. At first, they thought it was an error, an equipment glitch, but the readings kept coming. Metallic density, magnetic irregularities, and a shape. Vague, but too symmetrical to be dismissed as random rock. What's more, it wasn't sitting on top of the ice. It was encased inside it more than a mile down. Whatever it was, it had either fallen there before the last ice age, or the ice had formed around it later, sealing it in like a beetle in amber. Historians still argue whether the reports were real, or part of a grand internet misinterpretation. The data was incomplete. The team went quiet, and then the chatter just stopped. Naturally, this opened the door to speculation. Some claimed it was a meteorite, one of the thousands that crash into Antarctica each year. The cold, dry conditions make this continent ideal for preserving them, after all. In fact, Antarctica is one of the world's best places to find space rocks, some older than the moon. But others, people with more imagination and fewer peer-reviewed publications, said it wasn't a rock at all. They said it was a craft, something not of this earth, something that crashed, or maybe landed and never left. The theory gained traction when certain documents, allegedly leaked from classified satellite programs, mentioned a triangular structure near the South Pole, perfectly geometric, with thermal readings that didn't match anything around it. Again, maybe coincidence, but this was followed by strange seismic activity in that region. Soft quakes, deep tremors, nothing catastrophic but oddly rhythmic, like a mechanical breath. You step carefully now, each boot pressing into soft drifts and firmer crust, as if listening for a beat beneath your feet. The terrain here is flatter. The snow is oddly pristine. No cracks, no wind-scoured patterns, just smooth expanses that curve slightly, as though covering something beneath, like a blanket pulled tightly over a restless sleeper. In 2012, Google Earth hobbyists, those dedicated nighttime digital archaeologists, found what they claimed was a circular formation, buried in the snow near the Ellsworth Mountains, not far from one of those geothermal anomalies. The image looked off, like a buried dome perfectly round with a depression in its center. Skeptics said it was a sastrugi, a natural snow formation created by wind, but some argued it was a hatch. Even more curiously, a few weeks after the images gained traction online, that section of satellite imagery was updated, slightly blurred, overexposed. The formation was still there, but different now, softened, pixelated, like someone had painted frost over it. Now, does this prove anything? No. Does it feel like the kind of coincidence Antarctica specializes in? Absolutely. You take a breath. The air is cold in your lungs, but oddly fresh, like it hasn't been breathed in a while. You remember the Wilkes Land anomaly from earlier? The massive gravitational disturbance under the ice, measuring hundreds of kilometers across. Some scientists believe it was caused by a giant asteroid impact, a possible dinosaur killer. But the shape is odd, round but deep like a capsule lodged at an angle. Could it be a natural crater? sure. Could it be something placed there? Well, you know what kind of podcast you're listening to. There's a theory, and I promise, it's one of the wilder ones, that the object under the Wilkes Land anomaly is a massive buried spacecraft, kilometers in diameter, sealed beneath ice for tens of thousands of years. Some even claim that this object emits low-frequency radio waves. Nothing intelligible, just a soft pulse like a heartbeat, or a beacon. A few researchers from fringe groups reported symptoms after visiting the area: nausea, disorientation, strange dreams. Official reports chalked it up to altitude and poor nutrition, but the journals they kept scribbled half-frozen pages tell different stories. One entry reads, "The snow feels wrong. It's too quiet. Like it's listening." And that's the thing, isn't it? Antarctica makes you imagine things. It invites mystery. When you're surrounded by 14 million square kilometers of blinding, white and absolute silence, the mind fills in the blanks with whatever it can find. Sometimes those blanks are full of forgotten meteorites and lost planes. Other times, they're full of things that fell from somewhere else. You crouch now, hand brushing against a patch of ice so clear you can see down a meter or two. Below, tiny air bubbles shimmer in frozen stasis, each one a breath of prehistoric air, sealed away since before cities rose, before metal was forged, before stories began. You press your palm flat. The cold burns, but only for a second. Then it's just pressure, a subtle warmth maybe imagined but somehow real. And if you listen hard enough, you swear you hear something. Not a voice, not a signal, just a presence. Still heavy, watching. Whatever it is, whatever fell here, it didn't leave. It waits. You rise slowly, letting the wind brush your shoulders like the soft hand of an old friend, the kind that doesn't say much but knows everything. The ice underfoot creaks not loudly, but enough to remind you that even silence has weight here. You look out across the snow and see nothing, and that's what makes it so strange. Because once someone may have seen everything from this place. You trudge forward again, one slow step after the other, as your thoughts drift from the idea of buried spacecraft and underground warmth to something flatter, something far older, something drawn. You've heard of the Peary race map, right? It's the kind of cartographic curiosity that keeps historians, conspiracy theorists, and night owl YouTube viewers locked in passionate disagreement. A 16th century world map compiled by Ottoman admiral and explorer Peary Race. It's a beauty, inked on a piece of gazelle skin, richly decorated with colors, and stuffed with charming sea monsters and coastal cities. But that's not what makes it weird. What makes it weird is Antarctica. Or rather, what looks a lot like Antarctica. The Peary Race map, drawn in 1513, shows a southern landmass beneath South America. Not just a vague shape or mythical Terra Australis, but a detailed curving coastline, one that bears a suspicious resemblance to Queen Maud Land, a portion of East Antarctica. Now here's the kicker. It seems to show that landmass without ice, which is confusing, because the last time Antarctica was even remotely ice-free was at least 6,000 years ago, possibly much longer, and the official discovery of Antarctica didn't happen until the early 19th century. That's 300 years after this map was drawn. Historians still argue whether the landmass is truly Antarctica, or simply a cartographic error, perhaps a misrepresentation of South America's extended coast. Others suggest it could be based on ancient maps, long lost, that predate known civilizations, but that raises more questions than it answers. Where would Peary Race have gotten access to that data? He himself wrote in the margin of the map that it was compiled using 20 ancient charts, including maps from the time of Alexander the Great, which is bold, but interesting, and if those source maps were accurate enough to depict Antarctica's pre-glacial coastline, then someone was charting Earth thousands of years before. We're comfortable admitting. You glance down at your boots, now dusted with frost. The thought makes the ice feel thinner. Let's pause for a quirky twist. One of the earliest studies of the Peary Race map was done by a U.S. Air Force cartographer named Charles Hapgood in the 1960s. He proposed that the map was evidence of a lost advanced civilization capable of global navigation. His work caught the attention of none other than Albert Einstein, who reportedly wrote Hapgood a letter saying his ideas were interesting, although speculative. Speculative is science speak for okay, but don't quote me. Still, Hapgood's theory that Earth's crust may have shifted rapidly at some point, moving Antarctica out of a warmer climate zone into its current frigid position, is one that's quietly stuck around. Not embraced, but not entirely dismissed. It's the geological equivalent of side-eyeing a question you don't want to answer. So here's the picture. Imagine a civilization, long before ours, mapping coastlines by sea. Their charts get copied, then copied again, eventually handed down to Egyptian or Greek scholars. Later those charts, faded, misaligned but still legible, fall into the hands of Peary Rees, who redraws them with the flair of his time. He has no idea he's copying a prehistoric shoreline. He just wants to make a good map. But the image survives, a ghost of Earth before the snow. And you? You're walking across that ghost now. You kneel, brushing snow aside with a gloved hand. There's no map here, no parchment buried beneath the powder. But the shapes beneath you, the ridgelines, the shallow slopes, the buried valleys, they echo what that old map hinted at. Coastlines that shouldn't be there. Elevations that don't match the ice. Evidence, maybe. Coincidence, maybe not. And it's not just Peary Race. Other ancient maps, like the Orontius Phineus map from 1531, and the Mercator maps that followed, also show a southern continent with unsettling accuracy. Not exact, but close enough to feel deliberate. Some of these maps depict rivers where radar has since detected subglacial channels. They outline mountain ranges where buried peaks have recently been confirmed by satellite. The more we scan, the more the past seems to echo back. You straighten and look out again. It's strange knowing that the answers might not lie in the future, but in forgotten paper, buried in dusty archives and misunderstood for centuries. But the real question lingers like your breath in the cold. Who made the original maps? If Antarctica was ice-free, 6,000, 12,000 years ago, was someone sailing there, charting coastlines, taking measurements? Were they explorers like us, curious, methodical, determined? Or were they survivors, fleeing some ancient upheaval, recording what they could before the frost came? Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe there was no lost civilization. Maybe these old maps are a cosmic prank, nature's way of nudging us with mystery, a puzzle missing just enough pieces to keep us awake at night. You smile at the thought, because even in the silence of this place, Antarctica is loud with questions. Each gust of wind, each fold of snow, each shiver of the compass needle seems to say, "You don't know me yet." And maybe that's the point, not to find the final answer, but to keep asking. You take one more step. Your boot pressing into the same shape drawn 500 years ago, and you wonder quietly, warmly, who drew it first. The horizon has faded into a soft haze, a kind of gentle erasure that comes with snowfall so fine it barely counts as weather. You walk through it like a ghost through a memory. Everything muffled, smoothed. The edges of the world curl inward. No sound but your own slow steps, the shift of your coat, and the far-off hum of something deep beneath. It's here under this endless white that whispers begin again. Not wind, not weather, just ideas. Because the more you learn, the less the land feels empty. The more it feels inhabited by silence. And the more you wonder about what's still hiding in the blank spaces on every map. You reach a slight depression in the snow. Subtle, natural looking. But it's too perfect in its curve. Too round. You stop and let your eyes adjust. Beneath here, so the theories go, may lie more than warmth, more than lakes. Beneath here may lie something built. The idea of underground cities buried under Antarctica isn't new, but it's one of those rumors that keeps evolving. You hear it in military memoirs, in translated explorer journals, in odd snippets of scientific speculation that don't make it into official papers. The idea that under certain portions of the ice, beneath Queen Maud Land or beneath Wilkes Land, there are man-made structures preserved in perfect cold. They don't all agree on what kind. Some say ancient crumbled ruins, stone and dust. Others whisper about domes, tunnels, metallic spires frozen in glacial grip. The more creative types picture entire cities, symmetrical, geometric, intentionally buried, whether to protect or to hide. One now infamous theory surfaced from a report supposedly smuggled out of a NATO Arctic surveillance group. It described sonar images showing a hexagonal pattern of cavities, each about 50 meters wide, arranged like honeycomb cells. Artificial? Geological? The images naturally disappeared from the public sphere within weeks. Historians still argue whether the leak was real, a hoax, or just a misunderstood rock formation. But people remember the patterns, and it's not just radar. Over the past 20 years, multiple subglacial voids have been detected. Enormous empty spaces beneath the ice, some the size of small towns. They shouldn't be there. Antarctica's bedrock is messy, uneven, and in most places fully compressed. But these cavities, they're hollow, open, sometimes even warm. The most famous of these is the cavity beneath Thwaites Glacier, a chamber 2/3 the size of Manhattan. Scientists were baffled when they found it in 2019. Not only was it larger than expected, it was growing. So naturally, the idea took hold. What if that's not just empty space? What if something long ago created the chamber? As you walk forward, your eyes sweep over the soft curve of the land. Everything here is circular, elliptical, flowing. But every so often, the snow banks in just the right way to suggest alignment. Straight edges, right angles. It could be nothing. Could be wind. But it could also be the very first edge of something. In 2003, an anonymous post appeared on an obscure geology board, an account claiming to be from a retired military satellite analyst. The post described heat blooms detected beneath Antarctic ice, arranged in patterns too uniform to be volcanic. The words were vague, deliberately so, but it ended with one quiet line. If you knew what was under the ice, you wouldn't sleep either. And here we are trying to do exactly that. Of course, skeptics scoff. They point to Occam's razor. Geothermal flux, they say. Radar interference, they insist. And yes, that's probably true. But probably is a fragile thing in a place where no one's allowed to dig too deep, walk too far, or ask too many questions. It doesn't help that nearly every scientific expedition that finds something unusual goes dark shortly afterward. Equipment malfunctions, funding pulled, researchers reassigned. Sometimes, entire sites are sealed off under environmental protection clauses. Noble, sure. Necessary, probably, but convenient? Very. And then there's the legends. Indigenous myths from South America speak of a southern land, full of mountains that glow, and tunnels where light does not fade. Stories passed through centuries, retold by tribes who never traveled within 1,000 miles of Antarctic snow. Coincidence? Or inherited memory? You move slowly across the snow, each step soft, thoughtful. The wind has calmed completely, and now the only sound is the rhythmic creak of ice somewhere far below. Not cracking, just shifting, breathing. You imagine a city buried under your feet. Not metal, not stone, maybe crystal, humming softly in low frequency, built by hands that understood vibration better than combustion, architecture tuned to the earth's song. Or maybe it's just a pile of forgotten walls like Pompeii in deep freeze, waiting to be found and misunderstood all over again. One fringe theory suggests the city was never built by us, that it predates our kind, that it was left behind not by humans, but by something else that walked this earth when it was warmer, something that fled the coming cold, descending into tunnels and sealing itself in with ice and time. You shift your weight and feel the softest vibration. A truck, maybe? Distant machinery? No, just the hum. And beneath it, layers upon layers of frost, pressure, and secrets. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "The future enters into us, in order to transform itself in us long before it happens." Maybe Antarctica is the opposite. Maybe it's the past entering us slowly, through maps, anomalies, echoes, and radar, and asking us not to transform it, but to remember it. Or maybe it's just ice, a continent made of silence, a city made of nothing, and a story made entirely by the warmth of our wondering. You descend into a shallow basin now, a wind-carved hollow where the ice has settled into a smooth bowl of silence. The air here is heavier somehow, not colder, not warmer, just denser, like the molecules are moving slower. Or maybe time itself is thickening, settling into folds. This is where the stories begin to feel alive, not loud, not animated, but breathing, waiting, just beneath the surface. Because if ancient cities and buried craft haven't convinced you that Antarctica is more than just ice and wind, let's talk about something simpler, more primal, something with eyes or maybe no eyes at all. Let's talk about creatures. You've heard the phrase extremophile, right? It's the science world's term for any life form that thrives in places life has no business thriving. Places like deep-sea volcanic vents, radioactive pools, or yes, under 4 kilometers of Antarctic ice in complete darkness, in water just warm enough not to become a popsicle. In 2013, researchers drilled through nearly a mile of ice into Lake Willans, a subglacial body of water that hadn't seen sunlight in possibly hundreds of thousands of years. They expected sediment, maybe some fossilized microbes. Instead, they found living organisms, tiny, resilient, alive. These weren't just bacterial blobs clinging to rock. They were microbial ecosystems, feeding on minerals like iron and sulfur, swapping electrons in weird chemical dances that have more in common with alien biochemistry than anything taught in high school labs. And if they're down there, what else is? Here's where it gets weird. In 2015, a British expedition was drilling into another lake, Lake Ellsworth, when their instruments started returning pressure fluctuations, rhythmic, pulsing, almost like something was moving, just beyond the drill head. The data wasn't published. The project was halted for technical reasons. Naturally, conspiracy theorists said they found something. Historians still argue whether the signal anomalies were caused by equipment, calibration, or a mobile biological entity. It's vague, always is, but the data's real, and it wasn't just noise. Some researchers quietly proposed that larger life forms could exist in these lakes, creatures that adapted over millennia to complete darkness, crushing pressure, and zero external nutrients. Creatures that don't rely on sunlight, but on chemolithoautotrophy, a fancy way of saying we eat rocks, and like it. You pause now, imagining the waters beneath your feet, still, black, thick with mineral-rich fluid, and in that blackness, something shifts. Not a monster, not a scream, just a ripple, as if something large and slow just turned over in its sleep. There's a fringe report, unsourced of course, about a remote probe lowered into a borehole in East Antarctica. The feed allegedly showed movement in the distance, not blobby or drifting, but purposeful, slender, pulsing with bioluminescence. The footage was never released. Skeptics say it was ice crystals refracting light, that the movement was just current and the glow was a lens flare. Possibly true, probably true. But the people who handled the equipment never spoke publicly again. 2 left the research program within months, and still the ice says nothing. You step forward, and the ground crunches faintly beneath your boot. It's a comforting sound, reliable, consistent, but you can't shake the feeling that you're being followed. Not by a person, not even by a creature, just by the notion that something is keeping pace with your thoughts. That for every step you take across the snow, there's something moving below, a mirrored echo. We know there are worms living under the ice, some microscopic, others long enough to wrap around a pencil. In 2021, a new species of nematode was discovered in Antarctic permafrost. Still alive, still squirming, after being frozen for thousands of years. They were reanimated in the lab, wriggling lazily back to life like they'd just hit snooze for a few millennia. And that's just the small stuff. What happens when you scale that up? One theory suggests that beneath Antarctica lie entire ecosystems, warm and moist and fed by hydrothermal vents. Think deep ocean trenches. Now move that idea beneath the continent of ice. Creatures down there wouldn't look like anything topside. They might be eyeless, relying on pressure and temperature gradients to navigate. Or maybe they use sound, like whales in a bathtub, or electric fields like sharks do. Maybe they drift. Maybe they slither. Maybe they wait. You remember a peculiar study conducted in the late 2000s? A team sent a remote camera under the Ross Ice shelf and captured a few blurry images of what appeared to be tentacle-like movements in the periphery, again dismissed as ice. But the footage, quietly archived, has a timestamp that matches seismic fluctuations nearby. A coincidence? Antarctica's full of those. But here's something else. Under the transantarctic mountains, researchers found what they called acoustic shadows. Deep zones where sonar pulses go in and don't come back. Not absorbed, not reflected, just gone. Theories, caverns, odd mineral deposits, or something with the capacity to disrupt frequency. You stop again, boots planted in silence. The air feels thick, like you're inside a snow globe and someone just gave it a little shake. You imagine what it would feel like, standing on a thin sheet of ice above, a lake filled with creatures that evolved, without knowing what humans were. Creatures whose entire history exists in darkness, who maybe don't even move unless something like a drill or a voice, or a single misplaced footstep disturbs the quiet. You exhale, and somewhere far below maybe something does too. A soft current, a ripple, a silent question. Who's walking up there? You don't answer, not out loud. Your next few steps are cautious, not because of danger, no cliffs, no blizzards, but because the snow has gone utterly smooth. Glass flat, like the surface of a table no one's touched in 1,000 years. The stillness here feels different. It doesn't just surround you, it presses in, like the air is holding its breath, waiting for you to speak first. But you don't. You just listen. And in that silence, something begins to stir, not in the ice, not in the wind, but in memory. Because long before satellites scanned the ice, before boots crunched on frost, there were stories, warnings, myths, not from science, not even from maps, but from people, from voices that never set foot on the snow but somehow knew it anyway. The earliest comes from the Mapuche, an indigenous people from Chile. They spoke of a great southern land, frozen, forbidden, where the air turned to knives and strange lights danced in the sky, a place the spirits avoided, a place to respect, not conquer. Then there were the Selknam, native to Tierra del Fuego, who believed the world ended in the south. Not in a wall or a drop-off, but in a veil, a space where the sky met land and the soul couldn't go further. Their oral stories whispered of those who watch from beneath, silent guardians in the cold deep. Historians still argue whether these myths refer to Antarctica or are simply metaphors. But their direction, their consistency, their tone, something about them feels precise, focused. Then came the explorers. In the 1800s, as European ships began pressing into the southern oceans, strange journal entries began to surface, records of odd fog banks that moved against the wind. Instruments that spun out, refused to settle. One account from an English captain described a sudden warmth on deck while crossing near what's now the Antarctic Circle. Warmth that lasted 3 minutes, then never returned. The crew dismissed it, but the captain never did. Later, during the early 20th century heroic age of Antarctic exploration, more rumors began to drift back to the northern world. Whispers from expedition, medics about men who reported hearing, voices under the snow, scientists who experienced compass drift near certain glacial ridges, a Norwegian team that swore they saw a black spire on the horizon, rising from the ice and then watched it vanish. None of these tales made it into official reports. Of course not. Science is careful with its reputation. But the personal journals, the scribbled margins, the footnotes hastily edited out in final drafts, they still exist, and they all seem to nudge in the same direction. Something is down there. Or was. In the 1950s, during a secretive Cold War satellite mapping project, a technician reportedly flagged an unusual formation under the ice near the South Magnetic Pole. Not just structure, but symmetry. Angles that looked architectural. A day later, he was reassigned. The data file? Recovered, but the specific coordinates redacted in later releases. In 1974, a Soviet ice station recorded a sudden vibration, lasting 39 seconds deep beneath the crust. Not seismic, not tectonic, just a hum, mechanical in tone. Afterward, a layer of surface snow lifted, as if displaced by pressure, then gently settled again. The incident was attributed to glacial shifting. Of course it was. But weirder still, the station's clocks lost 6 minutes during the event. Glitches, malfunctions, maybe, or maybe not. And then there's the forgotten whispers of World War II. You already know about the rumors of Nazi activity in Antarctica. Submarines, secret bases, experimental tech. But hidden among the stranger stories is one particular tale, a warning received by Allied intelligence in 1945. It was short, mistranslated, passed through at least 3 languages, but its core message remained intact. Do not dig there. It is sealed for a reason. They didn't say where. They didn't say what. Just that it was sealed. And the wording sealed implies deliberate intent, not natural, not accidental. Sealed. You stand motionless now, feeling the breeze settle across your shoulders like a soft curtain. The sky is dimming, clouding over with the pale gold of Antarctic twilight. It never really gets dark here in summer, but the light bends differently, thinner somehow, less sure of itself. You remember something from childhood, a story about a door you're not supposed to open, and how that story isn't really about monsters. It's about choice, the weight of curiosity, the knowing that once the door swings wide, nothing is quiet anymore. Maybe Antarctica is the world's door, a place where memory, myth, and science blur, a place that holds its breath every time someone drills too deep. There are those who believe that what lies below isn't malevolent, just sleeping, preserved, protected by the cold, encased in pressure and silence so complete even its name has been forgotten. Some say it's a relic, others say it's alive. One whispered theory suggests the Earth itself is intelligent, that it hid certain things in ice, the way a body locks down trauma, a kind of planetary defense mechanism, forgetting not out of ignorance but self-preservation. What if Antarctica is the Earth's final dream? The place where stories go when they're too old, too large or too dangerous to keep awake. You kneel, not in reverence exactly, but close. You brush your glove over the snow and feel just faintly as if through layers of wool and frost and time. A pattern, not random, not wind-carved, just deliberate enough to pause your hand in mid-motion and listen. You stay there, still as the snow around you, kneeling on a surface that's no longer just ground. It feels deliberate. Maybe you're imagining it. Maybe the cold has finally done that thing people warn about, where your thoughts slow and start dreaming while you're still awake, but your fingers through the glove trace something that doesn't belong. A line. Straight. Not curved like wind, not jagged like rock. Just a quiet, unmistakable line pressed into the frost like it's been waiting. And suddenly it all clicks into place. You rise slowly, letting the quiet settle again. But now your eyes are scanning the terrain. Not for movement. Not for signs of life, but for design. For continuation. And it's there. Barely visible. Just beneath the snow. Subtle indentations repeating a rhythm. A pattern too perfect to be random. You're not standing in the middle of nowhere anymore. You're standing on something. A roof? A hatch? Or maybe just a surface so large and so well hidden. It took you hours of walking across it before you noticed you were part of a geometry You take 5 careful steps west and find another line, then one more perpendicular. You're inside a shape now. A square? A circle? A grid? It's impossible to tell from ground level, but you feel enclosed, surrounded, not by walls but by intention. Whatever it is beneath you, it was made. You hear it again. Not sound, not speech, just the sense of something below, moving slowly, breathing slowly, not in air but in pressure, in frequency. And that's when it hits you. What if Antarctica isn't just a storage locker of secrets? What if it's containing something? That line again, do not dig there. It is sealed for a reason. What if the ice isn't just a side effect of geography or Earth's wobble around the sun? What if it's not an accident at all? What if the ice is the lock? There's a growing fringe theory, quiet, rarely published, never peer-reviewed, that some parts of Antarctica exhibit acoustic dampening beyond what should be natural, meaning sound doesn't bounce, doesn't echo. It gets absorbed, like the land itself is swallowing it. Military sonar logs from the Cold War recorded a region where ping returns failed entirely, not delayed, not warped, just gone. Black hole behavior, on land. Think about that. Some suggest it's due to unusual mineral composition. Others believe it's the result of thick layered caverns with airless gaps. But a few believe it's deliberate design, a method of keeping something inside, and you're standing on it. There are stories, again whispers, about lost research, not just missing logs or scrambled footage, but entire teams relocated, reassigned, disappeared. The ice is cold, yes, but so is bureaucracy. In 1994, a seismic team recorded harmonic tremors beneath East Antarctica that suggested not a quake, but movement, steady, slow, patterned. It resembled tectonic behavior, until it stopped completely, as if noticing the attention. You think back to the magnetic anomalies from earlier, the geothermal spots that glow without explanation, the warmth, the breath, a locked door radiating heat, not because it's failing, but because something inside is waking up. And here's the thing, if the structure beneath you isn't just a natural cavity or a long-lost city, if it's something sealed, then that changes everything. Maybe the people or beings who lived here didn't just flee the cold. Maybe they caused it. A safeguard, a planetary quarantine, a final burial under endless, unforgiving frost. You take another step and something shifts underfoot. Not deep, just enough to make the snow shudder like skin under a breeze. The pattern below you, those lines, it's not just surface etching. It's layered, etched into strata, meaning that whatever built it didn't just make something, they made it to last. That's when you notice the air. It's still, but charged, like right before a storm. No lightning, no thunder, just the pause. That electric moment when everything waits. You remember something from an obscure paper written in 1971, long suppressed. A single line about a phenomenon called the Antarctic hum. Unrecordable, barely detectable, a frequency only a few instruments could pick up. But it was always there, centered on the same region, pulsing. It never stopped, only changed. The last recorded reading from that region occurred in 1999. The pattern shifted from a flat pulse to a waveform, as if it was no longer dormant, as if it had heard something. You, or maybe us, maybe all of us. The theory went nowhere. The data was locked up. The lab disbanded. But the waveform still lingers in quiet. Files passed hand to hand among those who still listen. And if it's listening back, what happens when the ice melts just enough? What happens when the seal breaks? You stand still now, heart calm but eyes wide. You realize you don't want to dig anymore. You don't want to drill or probe or explore. You just want to let it sleep. But the earth is warming. The ice is thinning. And some doors once made were never meant to stay shut forever. You take a step backward, not out of fear, out of respect. Whatever this is, it's not a tomb. It's not a ruin. It's something else. Something old. Something aware. And it remembers. walk backward, slow and measured as if movement might wake something. The lines beneath the snow are fainter now, or maybe they were never really there. Maybe they were always meant to disappear as soon as you noticed them. The horizon has softened into a pearlescent blur. No direction, no true light, just that same eerie not-quite day that wraps Antarctica like a shroud. And the deeper into the stillness you go, the more you feel it. You are not alone. Not in a horror movie way. Not in a campfire tale sort of way. There's no jump scare here. Just presence, observation. A quiet watching that's older than memory, deeper than language. You breathe in slowly. The air tastes like ice and dust and distance. You remember all of it now. The subglacial lakes that glow in silence. The microbes that woke after 10,000 years of sleep. The maps too accurate for their time. The heat where no heat should be. And the door beneath your feet that might not be a door at all. It might be a lung. One last breath. Or one first. There's a concept in quantum theory that suggests observation changes reality. That the mere act of looking collapses the probabilities into something fixed, measurable, real. And here you are, having looked. You wonder what you might have changed just by being here. The snow has stopped. The wind has paused. You glance back at the ridge you descended. No footprints remain, as if the ice itself has swallowed the memory of your journey. The only proof you were here is the quiet thump of your heart and the tiny vibration in your boots that may or may not be real. There are no answers, only echoes. Theories stacked like frost, stories preserved like amber in the deepest freeze. Some say what's beneath Antarctica is alien, others ancient. Still more believe it's ours, built long before we forgot how to build such things. A civilization lost not to time but to ice, to silence. But the one thing everyone agrees on, whether scientist, sailor, or late-night host whispering into your ears right now, is this. Something is down there. Something we haven't named. Something we haven't understood. Something that has never needed us and probably never will. You begin the slow ascent back toward the edge of the shelf. Your legs are heavy now, your thoughts thicker. Each step pulls you further from the still point. The hum fades, not gone, just further away, like a drum beat behind a closed door. And as you walk, you find yourself not relieved, but grateful. Grateful it's still sleeping. Grateful the snow still covers what lies beneath. Grateful for mystery, because if the ice were to melt completely, if we uncovered all of it, understood all of it, named and dissected and cataloged every shadow beneath the ice, would we even want what we found? Or would we find, as always, that some stories were never meant to be resolved, only remembered? So now, as you settle deeper under your blanket, let the hush of the Antarctic world stay with you. That deep, slow silence where time moves like syrup and even the air feels preserved. The snow drifts quietly across endless white. The light bends soft and golden near the edges. And below, miles below, there's still something resting, not waiting, just being. You can let go of the questions now. No need to solve anything. Let the idea of vast hidden cities melt into stillness. Let the microbial dreams of forgotten lakes drift into the dark. Let the notion of watchers, sleeping structures, ancient pulses fade with the wind. It's just you now. You and the hum beneath the ice. You and the breath of the frozen world, slow, steady, older than the moon and quieter than prayer. The surface is cold, yes, but it's safe. The seals remain. The snow covers the entrance. The heartbeat slows again. The door remains closed. And you don't need to walk anymore. You're already there, drifting gently now, deep in the warm hush beneath the cold. The mystery can wait. Sleep, traveler. Sleep sweet dreams.